Okay, hello. Part two of women and stress. And I'm going to be honest, the same things that we're going to talk about apply to men, but a lot of what I covered on Tuesday, the first part was from Scientific American, which actually, here's the magazine. It's actually, I'm going to be taking some info from this as well. And they really focused on, defining the differences between women and men. So that's what I did. But today's part two. I'm going to show you another picture in just a moment and talk about some specifics. And then I want to give you two things that you can do for yourself to shift your body out of a stress response. So when we think of stress, our bodies are always on a continuum throughout the day. And at one end of the continuum would be in a coma. Asleep maybe sounds less dramatic, but nothing going on, no responsiveness to anything. And the opposite end of that continuum would be a full-blown panic attack, right? Hyperventilating, heart racing, all that stuff. And where we are along that continuum throughout the day depends on what we're perceiving, what we're experiencing, and then how our bodies are reacting to it. And the way that your body reacts to it depends on what you think about it. So there's what you actually, the events that happen. And then the second piece is what you actually think about that. And that's going to land you somewhere on that continuum. And we don't want to be in a coma all day, right? You don't want to be on the end of the continuum where you're not responding. We need a stress response. We need action. We need to tell our bodies it's time to take action, even if the action is just to get up and get moving. So there's a purpose for that whole system, and it's meant to work very specifically. It is not designed to stay at the end of the spectrum where you are constantly turned on in a hyperly vigilant state or where you're experiencing everything as a threat. That's not how we're meant to live. That's not how our bodies are meant to function. So that's what we're looking at, is where are we on this continuum? And then what do we do about it? Okay, so let me pull this up. And I want to make this be bigger so you can see. Okay. I'm going to go through this because it may be too small for you to read on the screen, and I'm going to leave it up here a bit. So if you are trying to read it, you can hopefully do that. If you have known me for any length of time, or maybe you're part of my tribe, because I've been in health and wellness for many, many years. And the way that I work with people has been specifically around their health. And so these systems are very much affected by your stress. Now I really focus only on stress because these systems get so affected. And so the work that I have done with people, and the work that so many people are really noticing themselves needing to do these days, gut issues, metabolic issues like type 2 diabetes, insomnia, things like that. Those things are very prevalent, and there was no shortage of work to help people with that. But when we looked at just the strategies for that, okay, your gut health is a problem. Let's change your diet. Let's heal your gut lining, get rid of leaky gut. And all of that does have to be done. But if you do that and you don't look at this continuum of stress and where you are on it and what's that doing, you're not going to have the results that you want, and they're not going to be sustainable. And that's what happens, is that people get better for some length of time, but because they haven't addressed this other so important piece of it, they find the symptoms come back. So here's a couple of places, working from home with the dogs. Here's a couple of places where stress will affect different systems of your body. So let me read this to you. Your prefrontal cortex, you can see right here, is the front of the brain where she has her hand. And that's where you plan things. That's where you have good decision making. That's where you problem solve. That's where you're creative. So the prefrontal cortex, this is showing the parts of the body that are negatively impacted by stress. So the prefrontal cortex actually gets turned off. And then you're not great at decision making, problem solving, being creative. And people see that in their jobs. They see that if they have a high stress job or they're dealing with a lot of things, or they come home at the end of the day, maybe they get themselves through during the workday, but then they get home and they have nothing left. That part of the brain actually turns off. Okay. Over here is the hippocampus, and this is where learning and memory take place. And so, learning and memory, brain fog. I have talked to so many people, and years ago, I myself had it, brain fog, where you're like, I can't even remember. I'm driving in my car, and where am I supposed to be going right now? I can't even remember. I just picked up my phone. Who did I say I was going to call? Right? It's like that. It's that brain fog memory. And I don't know if you can read this, but not only is learning and memory, so learning would also be if you're at work and you've got a new project to take on. So not only being able to plan and decision make from up here, but also learning about it. Like, what do I need to learn to make sure I'm effective? And this whole area of the brain actually shrinks in size when people stay in chronic stress. So that's pretty negatively impacted. Okay. Not that we can't turn it around, but there it is. The amygdala is back here, the back of the brain. That's like the survival brain. Maybe you've heard people say the amygdala hijack. When people get stressed or stay stressed, the amygdala, the back of the brain, the survival brain, like the reptile brain, hijacks the thinking, and everything that would happen in the front goes right into survival mode. All right. And that's where all the activity is going. Mesolimbic dopamine system is over here. And what that means is those are certain neurons that are critical, and they get disrupted. And when those neurons and that part of the brain is disruptive, people find that their motivation is impacted. They can't, they set out a goal. Let's say New Year's Day, you set out a goal to lose weight, and you can't stick with it. Some people say, I have an addictive personality. I end up going and eating things that aren't good for me. I have an addictive personality. There's no addictive personality. Okay. There's parts of your brain that are working the way they should, and there's parts of your brain that are not working the way they should. So that part is going to be affected there. Okay. Now looking into the rest of the body, right? Chronic inflammation. And if you have any health issues, if you've read anything around health, even around the pandemic of the last 2 years, people who are inflamed do not do well. People who are inflamed, their systems don't work the way they're meant to. So chronic inflammation brought about through stress hormones. So when you're under stress, you're releasing certain hormones. It affects the immune system. All kinds of diseases will escalate throughout the body, autoimmune issues, all of that. Okay. I'm going through this slowly so that you have time to look at it while I have it up. The circulatory system, that's that end of the spectrum, the continuum where you're in panic mode, right? Heart is racing, breathing is elevated, all of that. When that stays constant, the cardiovascular system gets negatively impacted. So again, these are all of the negative impacts in the body from chronic stress. Your metabolism, cells throughout the body start to be less responsive to insulin, which then creates metabolic changes. People don't lose weight, and they gain weight in their belly, which is kind of the worst place. When we put weight on our legs or arms, that's more of like storage for when you need it. but when you put it on your belly, it's also storage, but it also will get released very quickly into the system, which can cause like a cascade of fat in the bloodstream, which is not good. The other thing I want to say about that with diabetes, you can maybe read here. If you do have diabetes or you're pre-diabetic, having elevated cortisol, which is what happens when you're stressed all the time, cortisol tells the body, we're in fight or flight mode. You need to release some blood sugar so we have the energy to run the way we need to. So even though you're trying to manage your eating, when you're stressed out, your sugar is going to be very wonky because your cortisol is going to keep telling your liver, release sugar into the bloodstream because we need it because we're in trouble. So that's two ways that chronic stress is going to affect your metabolism. Okay, definitely affects fertility. It affects all of the reproductive hormones. So if you are in that stage of life where you're trying to have a baby, you might see that gets, and there's like so many stories out there of people who were trying. They were very stressed about it. It didn't happen. And then the second they stopped trying and relaxed, they got pregnant. But also later, when you're not trying to reproduce, but the hormones through menopause, which are already being wonky, right? Because they're changing. Um, all of those hormones are very much impacted by stress, and so is thyroid hormone. So, if you have thyroid issues and you're not thinking about your adrenals and your cortisol, you're missing a big piece of the picture because thyroid hormone comes down from the brain, the pituitary, telling the body, the thyroid, to make more hormones. Cortisol will disrupt that. Cortisol will actually disrupt that pathway of thyroid hormone production. And so when you're having chronic cortisol being produced, not only the reproductive hormones, but also the thyroid hormones. And then it actually affects your chromosomes. These here are telomeres, which are parts of the DNA or the chromosome, and it has to do with our longevity. And chronic stress will whittle away at the ends. You can see this one here is missing the red. I hope you can see it. But when people are stressed by social circumstances, the telomeres get shorter and frayed, and that actually affects your lifespan. Okay, so I'm going to take this down. If somebody wants this, I'm happy to send it to you. I just want to not have it be distracting. But I'm happy to send it to you. You just have to put a message in the comments. This is streaming in multiple places, so I won't necessarily see it now while we're chatting, but I will look later and I'm happy to send it to you, okay? But what did I want to say? Oh, there's two things that I want to share with you right now that will actually lead into what you can do to help your physical body recover. So when we look at that continuum and where you're at from total coma to all out panic attack, right? And that it's purposeful to have a system that gets you going. Cortisol is not the enemy. If you didn't have cortisol go up in the morning, you wouldn't get out of bed. It's the cortisol that says, hey, it's daytime, you're awake, get up, get moving. But it needs to be an appropriate level, and it needs to then come down as the day goes on so that you can get to sleep at night, etc. So the system is designed very particularly, and there's things that we do that affect how that system works. Another conversation for another day would be your thoughts and feelings. And that's a big one. That's all the rewiring that you're probably hearing and seeing a lot about. That's a lot of what I do with people now is rewiring. But that's a different, bigger conversation. Today, I want to talk about your body more and two ways that you perceive things. Well, one way is how you perceive it, and then what happens in your body that you can actually make a difference and change. So the first thing is your vision. When you see something that is upsetting, let's say you're driving along and you see an accident, or you look through your email and you see we're going to repossess your car or whatever. Something is like, what is that? Right? So you see something, it's a visual. What happens is your vision narrows, just like the view on your phone. What's it called? Not the horizon view, the landscape view, the portrait view, right? When you look on your phone and like, let's just say you're on a Zoom call on your phone, it's all black and you just see a skinny picture. That's what your eyeballs do. Your vision actually narrows and focuses like laser in because it just saw something that upset you. It saw something that made you react, that had a fear reaction, really, is what it is. So our vision, our eyeballs actually will constrict and focus in and narrow. And then when that happens, your brain gets the message, problem, like, is anybody as old as me? Do you remember warning, warning? What was that? You remember that show? Forget it. Anyway, your brain gets the message from your eyes, there's a problem, because as soon as the eyes do that and hyperly focus in, the brain goes, up, problem, and it will trigger the sympathetic nervous system, the part of your nervous system that's going to start to bring you from coma to all out panic attack. It kicks on. It kicks on because it got a message from your eyes. The other thing that happens as that sympathetic nervous system kicks on is you feel your breathing go up. You feel your heart start to race, right? If you see something, you get a text on your phone, one of your kids is in trouble. Hi, Linda, I'll send it to you. Thanks. Yep, no worries. If you get a text, something, right? You start to breathe fast. You feel your heart race and your breathing goes up. So your vision and your breath are two ways that your body responds immediately, and they're both ways that you can get some control over that response. So here's what you do in terms of visual. We just talked about the stress responses and narrowing, hyperly focused, right? So what you want to do is set your gaze far away out to the horizon. Look out, because what's going to naturally happen is your pupils are now going to dilate. You don't tell them to do that. You don't have any control over it. That's why it's called the autonomic nervous system. It's automatic. But that's what happens. Instead of being constricted, they will dilate and open, because now instead of looking at something right here, I'm looking way out on the whole horizon. And so when I do that, the eyes will naturally start to take in what's in the periphery, they'll scan, and then the brain will go, oh, well, if you're scanning the horizon and you're not hyperly focused in, we must be okay. Maybe it's not as dangerous as I thought, and it will start to calm your nervous system down. So just look out. Find something far away in the horizon and just start to focus on it and let your eyes do their thing. It's not going to be the be all end all, but it's one thing that you can do immediately if you're feeling like that. The other thing, and this is very cool, I think, is your breath. Because your breath, if you think about it, every emotion that we have is correlated to a certain way of breathing, right? Every activity that you do is correlated to a certain way of breathing. So when you are laughing really hard, right? Somebody's belly laughing, they're breathing in a certain way. When you're sleeping, you breathe a different way. When you're in conversation, you breathe a different way. When you're yelling and angry, you breathe yet a different way. When you're crying, again, it's a different way of breathing. So each of those emotions, and then along with activities, if you're going for a run, if you're sitting reading a book, each of those things requires a different type of breathing. So your body responds to things by changing your breathing, and it works in the opposite way. Your breathing can help change your body. So when you do deep breaths, like as if you were sleeping, right? You watch a baby when they're asleep, they breathe really deeply. You see their cute little bellies really expand. When the belly expands, when you allow yourself to breathe and let your belly out, the diaphragm sits in your just below your lungs this way. When you allow your belly to expand, the diaphragm can drop down. When the diaphragm drops down, the lungs can fully expand and the heart also expands, that whole space in there. And the heart, it doesn't feel constricted and it's got to go small and fast. It can go slow and deep, and your lungs can really fill each air sac in those tiny air sacs in your lungs. Your lungs are like two paper bags that you fill with air. When your diaphragm drops down, they can fill deeply. You can slow your breathing down, and then your brain says, oh, well, if our breathing is going slower and deeper, I'm doing these deep breaths, I must not be running for my life. I must be okay. It tells your nervous system, all right, you can stop going towards that continuum. So, those are two things that you can do immediately when you're feeling very stressed. Whether you know the reason why you feel that way, you just got some bad news, you just saw something happen, or you don't even know why. Maybe you've been so stuck in chronic stress that you feel like that even when there's really nothing going on, but that's just where your body is because your body doesn't know how to turn it off. Okay? So gaze far out into the horizon, let your eyeballs tell your brain a different story. And then slow, deep breaths. Really let your belly expand out so that your lungs can expand and your heart can expand so they can slow down and not have to do fast, shallow breathing and pumping. Okay. And that will at least give you some pause and give your body physiology some calmness. All of the other things that I went over in that picture from the beginning, they're going to take more work than that, right? You're not going to turn around inflammation just by doing that. But you're going to start to tell your nervous system it's okay, and you're going to start to get some control. It's called self-regulation, and you want to get some control over your nervous system. You're also going to have to address the feelings and emotions that you have, whether they're emotions from today or emotions from 40 years ago. And I know a lot of people are like, I can't do that because I don't want to bring those emotions up. I don't want to have those emotions affect me. And here's what I want to say to you. They're affecting you. The emotions that you are afraid to bring up are already driving your bus. They're doing it. They're in control. So by being fearful of allowing them to move through, you're actually giving them the control, not you. So we have to look at the emotions and then your thinking, the way that you think and perceive your world and yourself. So all of that is what's going to make the biggest difference for long-term changes. But at least your vision and your breathing in the moment can start to give you some control over your physiology. Yeah, Linda, I understand that, and listen, all of us have life changes because that's what life is. There's going to be loss, there's going to be major changes, and it's how do we navigate through that. So I'm sure it was very impactful for you, and I'm sorry for that. I think I remember from an earlier live exchange that you've had some really difficult stuff. So I'm sorry for that. And to live your life the way that I think most people want to live their lives is to not get stuck there. Okay? All right. So, you know what, Linda? I will find where you posted this and then I will just attach it in a comment there so that you can then just download it from there. Okay. All right. Well, I hope that that was helpful. I hope you have a little bit of clarity around what's actually happening in your body and two things that you could do about it. All right. And I'll look for some comments if you have any other questions, and I will see you next week. Thanks so much. Bye.